I'm Erica from the Bronx, New York.
I'm Meredith from Phoenix, Arizona.
Bringing you the latest in news and politics.
Filled with snarky views and pithy commentary.
You're listening to the Two Conservative Lesbians Show. Alright guys, we are here with our 18th episode. This is actually the episode before the finale of our season, and we're going to take a long break over Christmas. So, you know, this is like our last time we'll be bringing you up to the minute, up to date news. Next week we're just going to kind of BS our way through, you know, our favorite stories of the year, basically.
That's going to be good. We'll get some updates. We'll find out what changed over the course of the year. It'll be fun.
It will. It'll be awesome. And so without further ado, we're going to just start with the picks that Meredith had for the week.
Well, alright. So first of all, we're going to go outside of the country. We're going to France for our first story, where, you know, anti-Semitism there is getting crazy, and it's starting to even spread down into the elementary school, because everybody knows, you know, if parents are horrible racist people, your kids are probably going to be horrible racist children. So an 8-year-old girl in France was cornered on the playground and verbally harassed for being Jewish. 2 fellow students who were of North African origin, I think you can hear the quotation marks in my voice there, they didn't really want to call them Muslims, but it's pretty obvious that they were. It was both the girl and her younger sister, who was 6, and apparently, according to the parents and the Bureau for National Vigilance Against Anti-Semitism, the teachers did nothing about this. It was actually fellow students who stopped them from being bullied on the playground. The teachers didn't do anything.
What did the teachers didn't do anything, so what's happening now? Is anything being made of this? Are they going to, like...
Well, the girl's father, the older sister, her father had out of the school, and she refused to return to the school. So he's filed a complaint, and apparently there were 6 teachers or adults at the school that were told by the girl that she was being harassed, who just did nothing at all. So they're looking for the students and the teachers to be punished for this, you know, and to actually have apparently the parents of the children who were doing the bullying have refused to punish their own children for it. So that's not really surprising, considering the levels of anti-Semitism in France, but it is kind of shocking in a way, and I think that it's kind of signals it's time for anybody who's Jewish to get out of there.
And go where is the question.
They're flocking to Israel at this point, because there really is no other place for them to go where they're not being harassed. I mean, it's ridiculous. We just had Ireland, France, and I believe either Sweden or Norway has just announced that they consider Palestine to be a real country, which... that just frustrates me greatly, because I love Ireland, and I thought they had a little more common sense than that. They were backup plan if America goes to hell.
Yeah, I do remember reading that, because I remember saying that now I'm going to have to find a new place to visit next year, because I actually planned on visiting Ireland at some point next year, and now I'm like, do I really want to?
My family is all from... like, my ancestors all came here from either Britain or Ireland, so I'm probably still going to end up going back there at some point, just for, you know, a chance to find my own heritage, but it's kind of difficult for me to like them right now. It's pretty sad.
Yeah.
Anyway, outside of that, apparently we have now confirmed that it's very, very difficult for people to find primary care doctors under Obamacare. Surprise, surprise.
I think you have your facts mixed up. I don't think you've gotten viable fact checkers and sources here. I mean, did you run this by Al Sharpton and the brilliant minds at MSNBC? Because I bet you that they know all about this.
Well, you know, this is the Associated Press that it's coming from, so I don't know. They're not exactly a conservative outlet here,
They're not exactly a journalistic outlet anymore, actually. That's still in question.
Well, true, but if they're saying something negative about Obamacare, it probably is even worse than what they're saying it is. Like, you know, I don't know. A study done by the Physicians Foundation this year said that 81% of doctors have described themselves as being overextended or at full capacity, and 44% of doctors say they plan to cut back on the number of patients they see, or retire, or work part-time, or just close their practice entirely to new patients. So it's not good. It's really not good. We flooded the market with new people, with insurance people, and now nobody can get in to see a doctor in the first place.
Right. Well, you know that pro-Obamacare people are simply going to say the issue is not Obamacare. The issue is that not enough of our children want to grow up to be doctors and lawyers. That if we had more doctors, then we wouldn't have such a backup in being able to have a doctor.
I'm sure they'll say that. Well, but they're not exactly encouraging people to be doctors either. The more regulation they put on these doctors, the more it costs them to run a practice. It used people want to be doctors not just because they wanted to help people, but because they wanted to make money. That was the idea. You become a lawyer or a doctor because you can make money. And now, it's just so difficult to be a doctor. There's so much regulation, so much that you have to do that's going to cost money to keep your office open. And you're not going to make much money off of the insurance plans either. Trust me, I know this. Insurance plans do not pay you very much.
Right, you actually make a good point there, because I know that, you know, back in like the 40s and 50s, the thing was you wanted to be what your parents were. So, you know, it was likely that if you were a cop, it was because your grandfather or your father or your great-grandfather was a cop. If you were a doctor or a lawyer, it was because previous generations were a doctor or a lawyer and you were following in the footsteps. But I guess now you find in today's day and age, any parents who are police officers, doctors, or lawyers or anything like that are telling their children, you don't want to do what I'm doing, either because, you know, it doesn't pay the bills the way you might think, or it's not safe in the case of, you know, police officers, where it's less likely that you're going to follow in your parents' footsteps. Like, are you going to be an optometrist now, the way your parents are? Or are they telling you don't do it?
Well, it's funny because my mom is always joking about how, are you going to take over the family business? And I'm like, no. But it wouldn't have mattered. I am very squeamish about eye diseases and things like that. And I could never be an optometrist as a result. But no, I mean, I'm definitely not going to follow my parents' footsteps. Mostly because, yeah, I've seen that it doesn't pay the bills. If you want to be a good doctor who doesn't just push people through, like, you know, every 15 minutes and smack them in the face with a prescription and send them out the door, you don't make any money because you care about your patients. And that's the way it's been set up now, is that to make enough money to pay your bills, you have to just see as many patients as possible, and to hell with actually caring about their health. You just have to get them in the door and then out the door as fast as possible.
Right, I completely agree with you. And so we'll see what happens the further into Obamacare we get.
Hopefully we'll only have to deal with it for a couple more years, you know?
Right.
We get the right person in office in 2016, and maybe we can stop this from becoming even more of a, you know, redacted word here, bleep, than it already is, so...
Right. So, okay, so moving on, Time Magazine came out this year, because I know we've all been waiting with bated breath to find out who the quote-unquote person of the year would be for Time Magazine. I have to be honest with you, this was the first year that I forgot that Time Magazine's person of the year would be coming out, because usually I do, you know, pay attention to it. But this was the first year I completely forgot, and it wasn't until I turned on MSNBC, because Time Magazine, I think that they only go on MSNBC. They don't even bother to go on CNN or Fox News. Not that they would be invited, but anyway. And color me surprised that the person of the year was the Ebola, quote-unquote, health professionals.
Really?
Yeah. Which I had two instances of shock here. The first shock was not all the people who are contracted with Ebola are the health professionals. So I don't know if they should be considered persons of the year. And if I was someone who contracted Ebola, let's say in other third world countries right now, I would be kind of upset, like, oh, they're the only lives that matter. And speaking of lives that matter, I was equally surprised that the person or persons of the year was not Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin and Eric Garner, considering they've been at the epicenter of uproar, you could argue, for the entire year. And it's just now becoming this big thing. So I'm surprised that I haven't heard anyone from that black community, like Al Sharpton and everyone else, saying, you know, like, hey, Time Magazine, why didn't you give us the cover? Like, oh.
Yeah, that is interesting. But, I mean, we have to remember that, well, first of all, as far as the Ebola healthcare professionals go, you have to admit that these are people who voluntarily put themselves, you know, they brought themselves out of the safety of their own homes, the safety of countries where Ebola was not a problem, and put themselves in these countries to try to help people. You know, whether they're successful or not is another story entirely, but it is kind of a selfless act that is outside of just, you know, being unlucky enough to contract Ebola. So, but the interesting thing is when it comes to this Person of the Year thing, they never pick it based on who is actually worthy of being Person of the Year. I mean, Hitler was Person of the Year at one point. It's about who is most famous, who is most talked about throughout the year. And in that case, I really do find it surprising that it wasn't Michael Brown. Because he's been dominating the airwaves. This story has been dominating the airwaves since, what, August? Maybe longer. I'm bad at keeping up with when things happen. But I am pretty shocked that it was the Ebola healthcare people instead of him. That's,
you know, that
different.
They could have made a statement and made, you know, Person of the Year be, you know, Black Lives Matter hashtag and all that crap. I am very, very surprised. You know, maybe if they keep this protesting up, they'll get it next year.
Well, wasn't it the Occupy people that they were Person of the Year a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I think it was which is why, again, I'm surprised, because, again, the Occupy Wall Street didn't last as long. Like, that's another thing. I feel like they're not, well, then again, Person of the Year is kind of ridiculous, because before it was Person of the Year and they decided to be politically correct, it was supposed to be Man of the Year. And I guess enough people got pissed about that whole Man of the Year thing that now it's become Person of the Year, and you can argue persons, because I can't remember the last time it was one individual, the president. You know, that's usually the only time now that Time Magazine's Person of the Year is one individual, is every election cycle, that whoever wins ends up being Person of the Year. Otherwise, it can end up being a group of 3 or 4 people. It's like, whatever, it's a joke.
It's basically, because in an election year, it's always the president who's the most talked about person. So, I mean, it's kind of a joke. I don't really see Time Magazine as being relevant to anything anymore. I can't remember the last time I actually read a Time Magazine article about anything, really.
And if you read a Time Magazine article, I mean, it's 20 pages at most, and half of it is ads now. Like, they're just, it's a matter of time before they become Newsweek and become digital only.
Right.
I'm surprised that they haven't yet.
I've read articles on their website in the past few months, but I honestly don't have much respect for their journalistic integrity in the first place at time. So I'm not thinking that that's a great place to get my news, so why should I care what they have to say?
Right, exactly. And moving on to something else that was earlier in the week, it hasn't really carried much traction. I'm surprised, considering the uproar that has, and the backlash that the NFL has been receiving lately, but they just had a meeting with the owners of the various NFL teams, and they approved a new policy, which is called the personal conduct policy. And in a nutshell, what it does is it's going to create a position where one individual, his or her job is going to be to take on any and all allegations of abuse, and it also will cover instances like when the players come out on the field with their hands up in support of the Michael Brown